Hey, good morning. Good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on Tuesday, Mardi Gras to Fat Tuesday. Man, look at that. Even in the COVID environment, you see on the news how they're doing the parades now. They're just driving by the houses and everything. Pretty cool. Always a good time in New Orleans. Whew, a lot going on. Got my coffee. I hope you're doing okay today. We got a fascinating discussion today. So here's the thing. Lots going on in the terms of, critical race theory, racial reconciliation. We keep hearing this a lot in these days and time. I know out here in Long Beach, where we originate from, they got the framework for reconciliation. It's a thing. It's a thing they've been doing, trying to, I guess improve race relations is probably the most simplistic way of talking about it. I keep asking, what are we reconciling? And I can't get that answer. But they try it, But as we contemplate this as in such a time as this, here at Coffee Conversations, we just want to inform and inspire the people, right? So my favorite academic intellectual in the whole of the West Coast, we just want to just reach out to them every time and kind of get that, that high level of analysis, in of course, in the way that we talk, because he is the homie. So we just here talking like we talk. And so I looked on, on social media, and I see this flyer for whites only. I was like, oh my goodness, and so, hit him up, and it's a really fascinating event that they're having over at the California State University, Dominguez Hills. Seriously speaking, he's bringing some exceptional speakers there. Before we get to this, let me just show you one of the speakers. I was just trying to playing around and researching a little bit. Check this out.
To David and Heidi, and thinking about the first hour, and the way in which we are kind of representing Donald Trump. Think about someone who has diabetes, that there's already something wrong systemically in the body, and then you introduce a high level of sugar to that body, and what happens? It throws it all off, right? Now we could blame it on eating that particular item. But there's already something wrong in the body. So what I want us to understand is that Trump isn't the problem. He just simply accelerated it, intensified it, right? What we're facing in this moment, I believe, are the new redeemers. That was that political coalition in the aftermath of the Civil War who organized in order to seize political power and enforce white supremacy. So we could talk about the conspiracy theorists and the white nationalists. What we have is a Republican Party that is, in fact, the new redeemers. That's who they are. They are defending an idea of America that presumes that people like me, people who hold views that are different than them, do not belong here. And they are willing to kill in the name of it, at least some among them. And then you have people in leadership who are willing to defend them. So we have to be honest in our descriptions. As I said way back when, this is us. This is us. And we have to admit it and stop Trump gazing and understand that Trump didn't deform the Republican Party. The Republican Party vomited up Donald Trump.
Well, there you have it. Dr. Saban, good morning. How about that for a wake-up call?
Hey, I just gave you a new mantra. Hurry up and trademark it. Post up.
Hilarious.
Good morning, Brother Greg J.
Good morning.
Great idea, brother. Even Holly got her elected supervisor. You might have to run for office with this conversations, brother. I'm just trying to tell you.
Oh my goodness. Oh man! Wow! 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 So, Dr. Samad, you've done it again, and our brother there from Princeton University. Well, you give the background. How did you? How did you? Well, I'm not going to ask how.
Actually, okay, first of all, I'm glad to be here. And thank you for inviting me back, because I know there's people trying to get into your lineup. And so, you happen to tell me, whatever you want to. And that's the relationship, that we have going back from when you was across town,
Yes, sir.
We've been in the game now for about 25 years where we've been in each other's space.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in the radio space, but in the public discourse space, because KGLH used to be a huge supporter of the Urban Issues Forum.
Mm-hmm.
Urban Issues Forum's now over 20 years old. We have a book coming out later this year that talks about 20 years of public discourse. And public discourse is all about helping people to think, because we tend to run through life and parrot ignorance that other people say, or we're disingenuous in our advocacy, meaning that we say we Black, we say we believe, but as Minister Farrakhan say, we really don't believe.
Mm.
We just do, remember the Wiz, when Richard Pryor said the color is green,
yes,
the color is gold, the color is red. We go with that. That's many folk in our community. Okay. Now, Professor Eddie Glaude, I met him actually through Tavis Smiley. The first time Cornel West came to the Urban Issues Forum, which was 2006, Tavis came and he brought Eddie Glaude with him. And Eddie Glaude loved the forum. And he always said that he wanted to do it. Well, when I took the forum to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and then began to develop the Dymally Distinguished Speaker Series, last year he had committed to come. After he made that statement, he said on national television, Barack Obama is what America could be. Donald Trump is who America is. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, he is the first public intellectual that I have heard say that on a major network and not get kicked off. Okay. And that's what we need to do, is have serious race discourse where we can say what we feel, and white people can say what they feel, and Latino can say what they feel, and the Asian folk can say what they feel. Because in this era of Trump, acts of racial violence has risen against Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. Okay? And so we have to acknowledge that we're living in a period of highly racialized white entitlement. The history of race in America is one where the capitalists consolidated wealth over 150 years ago, and they promised the poor white farmer, no matter how poor you are, you will always be above the Black person. Your whiteness will allow you to survive. Now, this anti-racism workshop comes out of our president's charge. Last year, after the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, he said that he wants every unit on the campus to engage in some anti-racist activity to move Cal State Dominguez Hills toward an anti-racism campus where everyone feels comfortable in the environment. So this has been in the planning for months. Okay. Then we witnessed Election Day. Then we witnessed Donald Trump's nonsense around the election being stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we witnessed January the 6th, in which white people attempted a democratic coup. An anti-democratic coup is what it was. They wanted to install a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched them walk up into the Capitol building, and only one person got shot. Now imagine if that was Black Lives Matter or us or anybody, they would have mowed us down the moment we hit the first step.
Mm-hmm.
I had to say, now you know that outcome would have been different if this was Black people.
That's right.
I mean, that's as much of an acknowledgement of racial disparity and the differentiation in racial treatment as you could get. Okay. And so when we plan this as a series of 3 workshops. Okay. The first one was called for whites only, because we have some other anti-racism workshops going on campus. And what is happening, and each time we get into these workshops, you see the people of color, the Blacks and Latinos, venting on their racial experience, and white folk just either just sitting there silent, or they say, we're listening, we hear you, or they're not on the call at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a friend, this is a racial microaggression. We make fun of white people when they do this, when they tell you how many Black friends they have.
Yes.
That's a racial microaggression. Okay. But I have a few white friends, quite a few, a lot of them in academia. Mm-hmm. We can talk about, I have some friends, we can sit on their balcony and we could talk about race, smoke cigars and drink wine all night.
Right.
And then I have other white friends that won't talk about race at all. And so I asked this one white friend, I said, what do you think about racism? And he said, I don't. And I said, why? He said, because it doesn't affect me. I have another white friend. I asked him the same question. How come we don't talk about racism? He says, because it's an argument we can't win, meaning white people. It's an argument. He said, every time I get into a racial conversation, it goes sideways. It's because you're trying to defend the indefensible. So they don't participate. Okay? And I came to the conclusion, maybe they don't participate because white people don't know how to discuss race. Our problem is not the races. You have a lot of people, and we got some serious pushback on this, as we do anytime we bring a controversial speaker. Why are we having Angela Davis? Why are we having Cordell West? There are always people who do not want true radical thought in their space. Now, universities are supposed to be the safe space for academic discourse. And I have a white colleague, his name is Jeff Sapp, who is on our anti-racism task force. He said, universities not only have to become safe spaces, they have to become brave spaces. Some kind of way we have become afraid to talk about what's happening to us. But as you said in your intro, everybody wants to move toward racial reconciliation. Yeah. And in order to move toward racial reconciliation, you have to be able to discuss what's happening to you. Try that with your girl or your significant other. Have an argument with her, leave the house, come back that evening and try to act like ain't nothing happened. And see how far that gets you.
That's right. That's right.
She's not going to say anything to you until we revisit what you did that morning, right?
Right.
Yeah. White folk expect Black folk and Latino folk and Asian folk. Let's just move on. Well, wait a minute. We got to talk about what just happened. And in our instance, We got a long list. And that's what they're afraid of. They don't want to revisit what happened because it's indefensible. Now, we understand that we're not going to get the racists. The racists, we know who they are, or we suspect who they are most of the time, because they're going to give you an indication. However, the problem with race in America is really not the racists. It's the indifference to racism. It's those who remain silent about racism. Randolph once said that if you are comfortable with my oppression, then you are my oppressor. Okay? And Martin Luther King said it even deeper toward the end of his life. He said, in the end, I will not remember the words of my enemies. I will remember the silence of my friends. If you say that you are my friend, you see that this is happening to me, and you don't say nothing, then are you really my friend?
Right.
And so we have all of these white liberals who profess to be, allies in our equity struggle, because it's no longer an equality struggle, because if you split the pie equally now, they so far ahead that we'll never catch up.
Let me ask you, Dr. Samad. So, all right. So indifference, we're having all of these forums that are happening. I know that what struck me about the framework for reconciliation that the city of Long Beach put together is, their first call, the guy says, well, how many of you have experienced racism? And it was like the Black people went mute. Are we also guilty of indifference when we have these discussions? Are we afraid to actually have these conversations? You mentioned courage as a hallmark of what you all are doing over at Cal State Dominguez Hills. It looked like we need some cojones in what we're trying to do out here.
Well, that's historical, Brother Greg. There were Black people that defended slavery, okay? Be like, Master, they getting ready to leave. I'm not a part of that. I'm happy where I am. Okay, you treats me good. Okay. So you always going to have confused Black people and confused people of color that think that the status quo, as long as you ain't beat me, everything is cool. And we have people in the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, which includes Long Beach, that have made a good living, helping white people navigate our community. You have others, who I anybody to watch this Netflix, Judas and the Black.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that.
Because that is the history of America, and it happens more often than you think it does. We are the generation of Blacks that think that white people won't do to us what they've done to every other generation. And we get all around us. And we bring them in. We invite them to the table. We ask them to have a cup of coffee. We put them on television. All right. We get real ridiculous with it.
Yeah.
But everybody who say they with us is not for us.
Right. It's so funny you mentioned that, because yesterday watched Judas and the Black Messiah, had a deep conversation at the dinner table about, snitches and, how we've done one another before we could even get to the front line. We just doing each other, and went to a deep dive. Did watch the documentary where William O'Neill was on there, just trying to see where this brother was at. Right. It was crazy, but man, yes, we will sell each other out, won't we?
Yeah. And then, people outside of our communities, Blacks and Latinos, they use that against us.
Against us, yes.
My assistant, Gladys Priscinda Jackson, yesterday called me. I didn't got about like 8 hate calls. I said, "I don't have to play them for me. Just tell me what they say. I just need to make sure ain't no threats, because then I have to move accordingly."
Yeah.
But she went on how these calls ranted, didn't leave no numbers, didn't leave no names. But the consistent stream through the conversation was, you need to focus on your backwards community. I don't know if I can cuss on this. This is not serious, right? I don't want your license to be in jeopardy. You had that 5-second button like that.
No, you can say what you want to say.
Yeah. So, they think our community is backward ass, and they say, y'all need to be focused on y'all's backward ass instead of trying to focus on us. Well, maybe we're backwards because that was by design. Mm-hmm. Maybe, we have not made the kind of progress that we should have made because we have intentional policies. Systemic, we use popular buzzwords in the discourse now. We want to say institutional and systemic racism. Well, institutions and systems are run by people. Mm-hmm. And if they can't, I don't know a person that would get in the middle of a system or an institution and allow it to run, because it's almost on remote control now. They didn't agree with it. They would try to change the system. So there's a whole lot of people who are complicit in moving the institution forward, okay? Moving the system forward. Even in academia, the disappearance of the Black professor is real. Your tenure is relied, upon your ability to fit into the culture. Well, if culture is racist, then you have to sit silent and be complicit in your own compromise. That's the kind of thing we see in university systems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting. All right. So I didn't know that there, Dr. Samad. Actually, now you got me contemplating a little bit, because I'm trying to figure out how are such, I'll call them progressive or strong Black voices sitting in these professorships at Princeton, Harvard, all these super conservative places. Mm-hmm. And then you're saying that their tenureship is hanging on by a thread.
Well, no, once they get tenure, they got a job for life. Okay. And that's when the muzzle would come off. So that's when you see public intellectuals really get out there. They were never able to fire, Ronald Reagan tried it, and the courts gave Angela Davis her teaching position back, but the bottom line is, in order to get tenure, you have to cooperate with your senior colleagues, or after, you're denied teaching the kind of classes that you want to teach, or you have to teach the history, curriculum, and conform your pedagogy to what they deem as acceptable, or you never get tenure. Mm-hmm. I got friends in academia who've been teaching over 20 years and haven't gotten tenure yet. Okay, because tenure is political. Right. And it's basically held in the hands of those in the departments that you teach in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some people, a lot of people had to leave in order to get tenure. And if you leave, you have to start over. You might have associate professorship or professorship at one college, but if you leave, unless you negotiated on the front end, then you have to reset, and then you have to earn your associate professorship and then your professorship. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very political thing. A lot of people end up leaving the academy because of the politics of the academy. Mm-hmm. And so when you see a brother like Professor Eddie Glaude, and he's a university professor, which means he can teach anything he wants to teach. He can develop his curriculum. He doesn't have to stay within a discipline, even though he's the chair of the African American Studies department at Princeton. He can teach whatever he wants to teach. And he's been teaching politics and race, and he's an exceptional cat. And he had committed to come last year, just before COVID jumped off. We had to cancel his speech, but he agreed to do it. And then there's Tim Wise, and Tim Wise has been out there for a minute.
Yes,
he's probably the foremost anti-racism expert out there. He's spoken to over 600 colleges, and he's written, a dozen books on white privilege, white entitlement, color blindness, all of that, because he understands, that his own kind are intentional about their dismissiveness of racism because of the fact that they have to give up in order to give equality. They have to give up privilege, or they have to give up a certain standing in the society, which is what they're afraid of.
It's interesting. I'm so happy that you got Tim Wise on there. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, it's about to be on and cracking right there." Right. I followed him for quite some time, and we're gonna play a piece at the end of the show here. It's about 9 minutes long. I just want the people to really just kind of marinate on him. This is the white man calling out white folks on their stuff.
Right. And he's always done that, you know. And that's our whole thesis. To get back, I went all the way around the block on all that for white people only. But what we decided to do is to tie vestiges of American racism to today's circumstance. Now, basically, what the white only sign was to establish exclusive space for white people. And we had calls of people offended by that sign. That sign has only been down since 1970. 50 years. Black people have been offended by that sign forever. This is not something we made up. This is a vestige of American racism that we wanted to use as a teaching moment. Now, I bet you if I had called the workshop, no racists allowed, let's stop racism, we wouldn't have had 1,000 people registered.
Wow.
But this brother said, because people are not used to calling out white people.
I'm curious to know, did you get a lot of pushback from black folks or mostly white folks?
Well, the first pushback we got was a black person. In the aggregate, it was white people. You have to also understand that we're now living in a generation of white people who haven't had to deal with racism at all. They haven't even had to think of it. Since Ronald Reagan, and they came with color blindness and race neutrality. So since the 1990s and the abolishment of affirmative action, you have a generation of white folk who haven't had to deal with race at all. And they're completely offended. And their parents taught them, when race comes up, don't talk about it. And then you have a generation of black folks and Latinos who have really never lived in a highly racialized society. They've lived in a racialized society, but not a highly racialized society. And so now that we want to raise the issue of race, many of them don't know what's happening to them. They know something's happening. But we see, new phenomena coming into our society, like the over-aggression of policing. Well, policing is not to serve us. Policing is for social control, to keep us out of the privileged spaces. Okay. So the white-only signs are not up anymore, but the sundown towns are coming back. There are several cities in Southern California that not to be in after dark, or you're going to get stopped.
Yes, sir. And if y'all don't believe it, I got an article on beachcityradio.com that talks all about that. And I think it's the 25th of February. We're going to have a man out of, I think it's the University of Virginia, that did a whole study on the sundown town phenomenon. I tracked him down, and he's going to come on Coffee Conversations to talk about it. Y'all would be surprised in the cities that you live in, that if you was caught there after sundown, you can forget about it. It's a wrap. Inglewood.
Right. Torrance. Signal Hill again. Right.
Yes.
All of those. It's happening today. And people don't understand anything. And we're conforming to it. Just put your hands on the wheel. And you still, you get shot because you asked, why did you stop me? Which to do. The officer is supposed to tell you and they telling you to shut up and, get the hell out, that kind of stuff, And so this is a time where we begin to teach people what is happening to us and tie it to the messages of the past. Next workshop after this one in April, the sign is going to be for coloreds only. And we're going to talk about not only the rise of racism against people of color, because there's a rise of racism against Latinos. There's a rise in racism against Asians, because Trump called the COVID virus the China flu.
China virus.
Yeah. And now people are beating up Asian people. In San Francisco, it's off the hook. Yeah. They cold cocking people up in San Francisco. Asians down the street. Where did this come from? We are going to talk about, and then there is the black on black thing that we're going to talk about. Because black people still victimizing black people. Coloreds only. So now that we don't want to talk about that. But these spaces, that they've put us in these boxes that they've compartmentalized us in, have forced us to turn on each other in ways that we ignore what the other community is doing. And then the last shop that we'll have in the fall, most likely September or October, is called No Negroes, No Mexicans, No Dogs. What we're talking about is the devaluation of life. And we're going to use mass incarceration and the immigrant deportation piece where they put people in cages. The only people you put in cages are dogs. Yet they've been putting humans in cages during the 4 years of the Trump administration, and they've been putting black people in cages forever. And we talk about how this type of dehumanization devalues not only black life, but Latino life, Asian life, East Indian life, But what we really want to focus on is the vestige of the sign. The sign, No Negroes, No Mexicans, No Dogs, was actually in Texas, not the Deep South, in Texas, from 1944 up until the 1970s. And so every time you saw that sign, you knew they was talking about you. They were devaluing you.
Let me just say this. I worked at a mortgage company, a very large mortgage company, when I first moved to the area way back in the day. And I worked in the foreclosure and bankruptcy department. And when we began to start foreclosure proceedings against a property, you had to pull all of the original documents, the deed, the condition, the CCRs, conditions, covenants, and restrictions paperwork. And I began to notice that there would be these clauses on a lot of properties in areas where it's just full of Asians, Latinos, and Blacks, where it would say, no Negroes allowed unless in a domesticated capacity. No Mexicans allowed unless in a domesticated capacity. No Chinese or Asians allowed unless in a domesticated capacity. And I'm talking properties, and if you talk about areas in Southern California like Baldwin Park, that's Asian, It's like you go over there, it's really, really funny. And I believe that people who are listening, if you went there and pulled those original documents, you would probably see those clauses on your property. They're not legal anymore, but the fact of the matter is that it existed.
Well, they're not legal, but they're cultural.
Yes.
There are still communities that don't allow you to move in unless you're married. They don't say that. That's what a domesticated capacity is. We don't want no single Blacks, single Latinos, single Asians over here trying to marry our women or trying to marry our men, the codification of the language. But don't look at what the law says, look at how the culture acts. Okay. We could use this last impeachment proceeding as an example. They clearly presented the case. You know, he clearly incited a riot. They say, yeah, we see all that, but you know, he's our boy.
That's our boy.
Now, basically, and I'm gonna tell you, we sipping coffee and talking, right? Gave up the game on this one.
Yeah, they did.
And between January 6th and this impeachment here, and they have told us, you know, everything that we thought you was against the law is not against the law for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so it makes you really think whether we live in a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you could break as many laws as they broke and tell as many lies as Donald Trump told during his presidency, I think the last count was over 20,000 lies he told.
Wow.
You know, and they want to prosecute you for one, you know, because you didn't cooperate with them. You know, they're telling you what the game is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not justice. It's just us.
Just us, right?
Man, this is really something.
Or in white people's case, not us.
Right.
And what we have to begin to do, okay, it always amazes me, you know, the gangsterism that takes place in our community and the Latino community, the bravado. We talk crazy to each other, but we will never speak. I know people who have never even raised their voice to a white person, never even objected. You probably still got black people that won't look white people in the eye.
Right.
Because I know you got black people who say white people, they say white.
Right. That's right.
And at some point in time, if you are equal in a society, you know, you should be able to talk to people the way they talk to you. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a firm believer, you know, in Sankofa. I'm a firm believer in karma. The energy you put out is the energy you get back. You know, people ask me how I get along, you know, so well with white people. I say, I get along with white people who respect me. They show respect to me. I show respect to them. They talk crazy to me. They go get talk crazy too. Yep. You know? And that's just the reality. I mean, that is just common courtesy, common reciprocity. Mm-hmm. You know, people can't come to you in disrespect and think you're going to respond to that kindly. But we do have people that do. Mm-hmm. I sat and watched people get talk crazy too. And they were like, man, if I didn't need this job, man, you know, let somebody take your humanity, man, you better come correct. Right. You know, and that's what we have to instill.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I think we tend to temper our behavior. You know, we're so busy. I guess, you know, what is the book is Black Rage. You remember that one, the Black Rage? And so, you know, we holding in this stuff, you know, and that's what's causing our unhealthiness sometimes because we're just so busy holding it in. And we can't be afraid anymore. And it's not always to say you have to, you know, like go off, but you definitely have to be strong about, you know, your lines of dignity. I mean, so I was sharing not too long ago about, so I was bused to school. I think my parent, I'm in that era of like when busing first happened. It's down in San Diego. And I could never, understand or come to terms with the racism, the prejudice that we would experience and the white boys looking down on us because I'm like, yo, I'm in the same class you are. How am I? I'm hearing the same stuff. So how are we, you know, how am I less than, you know? And so you got to be able to stand up and understand your equality just as a human, your human equality to that guy and say what you need to say. Mm-hmm. Well, somebody said we've normalized our own oppression too much.
Yeah, well, I concur. I concur. Even, okay, this is going to cause some of your listeners to go off. But that's okay. I can take it. I'm a big boy. Okay. Yeah. Even when we participate in holidays, we contribute to our own compromise. Holidays were created, to infuse capital into the economy, to keep the economy is like a spinning top. Yeah. And if you don't infuse capital in it every 2 months, then it starts to slow down, and then it'll topple over like a top. So we come up with these holidays, Valentine's Day, then Easter.
President's Day was yesterday.
Then Memorial Day, then 4th of July, then Veterans Day, Labor Day, and they find a way for you to infuse capital. Now, and then, I know it's sacrilegious to talk against Thanksgiving and Christmas, but, that's when we give up all of our money. We'll go in there until the middle of next year, to celebrate those holidays.
Yeah.
And don't you think separating you from your money is contributing to your own compromise? Yes. Because the only time we get treated halfway decent is when they taking our money. And any other time is get out of here. We don't want your business. Or you go to sit on a sidewalk cafe. If you don't order something, they calling the police on you. You can't go anymore and just order a cup of coffee. You ain't ordering food. You can't sit here.
Can't sit here. That's right.
We got some crazy things happening to us right now.
So let's see. Do you think racism is a form of mental illness? That's what our super producer Rhonda Love is asking.
Well, racism is not necessarily a mental illness. It's a learned behavior. Love is a natural thing. People are taught to love. Okay, and when you really study nature and study humanity, even hostile animals, when you show them love, they show love back. Racism is a learned behavior, and it is instilled in us, okay? Because it's basically born out of fear. It's born out of the unknown. What you don't know about, you fear. And so American society has created this otherness that has now been instilled in those who want to replicate American culture. Black people, replicate American culture. We have created our own subculture that has become the dominant culture. We want to be them and they want to be us. Okay. You see, some of the young brothers and sisters wearing shirts, they want, our culture, but they don't want our pain and that kind of thing. Because, let's just put it like it is. Black people are cool and everybody wants to be cool.
That's right.
everybody replicates it. That's where we see genres like R&B and jazz, and even rock and roll. It was basically emulating Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. And so we have to understand that this whole otherness that American racism has created, to fear anything other than yourself, is called xenophobia. And basically, before you try to find out about it, reject it. That's what racism is. Before you even know anything about it. Okay. How many times over the course of your life, this question is to you, Greg J, or to Rhonda. How many times over the course of your life has somebody told you, you're totally different than who I heard or what I thought you were? But that's because you didn't get a chance to know me, Everybody's had that experience, right?
Or you're not like them.
Right. You're so
my
intelligent. You're so
God.
intelligent.
You speak so well.
I went to school just like you. I learned what you learned, and it's just,
Let me
it's
tell you the
absolutely
story.
incredible.
Let me tell you something. Oh, this is so hilarious. So, Dr. Sabad, you and I were in South Africa together a couple years ago, right? So part of my tour, right? We were in this town called Franschhoek, and every time we go there, it's for the wine tasting. But every time we go there, my groups that I organize and take is always all black people. By the time we get to Franschhoek, and it is, the only thing different from apartheid is that the rules are gone, because you could feel it the minute you step off the bus, right? But it's in the wine countries out there where Stellenbosch University is and everything. So we go into this store and we're buying knickknacks and everything. And to exit the store, you had to push a button in order to, let the little system allow you to get out of the store. But the button is not easily found. It's not obvious that this button is there. So you kind of pause it to try to find, okay, how do I get out? But if you read the sign,
you stuck for a minute.
so if you read the sign, you say, push the button and you're out. So I'm standing there and this white lady standing there, South African white lady. And I see the sign. I discovered the sign. I said, oh, okay. Push the button. Boom. We go out. She looks at me. She goes, oh, you can read. I'm like, what the
heck? Yeah. I can talk too.
Man.
No. There is a certain assumption that is made about us. Mm-hmm. And there's also a certain assumption that we make about them.
That's good.
It goes back to the whole thing, all whites ain't racist and all races ain't white, And what tends to happen is that the assumptions that we make about, other people more oftentimes create disadvantages for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And King used to say, if we only took the time to get to learn each other, we would find out we had more in common than we had, in difference. Mm-hmm. But American racism doesn't allow for that because of the separation factor. Back to the again, for whites only or for colored only. The separation factor is probably the biggest contributor to the perpetuation of racism in America.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me personally, I don't care what they think about me. I'm just like, oh, I don't care. And I think it's rooted in, first of all, I just, maybe this is wrong based on what you're saying. I just don't care what they think about me. I really don't. I do want to fight for my people because I do see a history since we have been in this country of death and destruction. And I want to promote and preserve culture and always be about uplifting my people and uplifting my culture. But when I'm around and I'm in these spaces, I really don't care what they think. And when I was aboard the USS Nimitz in the Marine Corps, I had a roommate who was from Alabama, and every single day for about 7 or 8 months, when I woke up in the morning, he looked at me and he said, "You're just a fucking nigger." Every single day. And I experienced that hatred for a long time. Went to my superiors, asked for a transfer. They wouldn't do it, And so I learned from that hellish experience. And I really don't care what they are because I'm not what they think I am. And then also, too, if they would get to know me, like you said, they would know different.
Well, I mean, you remind me of a conversation that I had once around Berry Gordy's book, To Be Loved. Mm-hmm. It's a song that he wrote for Jackie Wilson before he founded Motown.
To be loved, to be loved.
Yeah, right, yeah. Eddie Murphy sings it in Coming to America. Right. Everybody has a desire to be loved. And, at this phase of our life, I like to say, life is 4 quarters, 1 to 20, 21 to 40. We're in the fourth quarter. And we used to wonder why our grandparents used to say such crazy shit. They just say anything, because when you're young in life, you do have a desire to be accepted. Maybe that's why a lot of our people conform the way they do. They know that if they're rebellious, they know if they're considered militant, if they're branded, if they're marked, they'll be blackballed. They won't be able to achieve what they desire to achieve. Now, we also know that that's not necessarily true, but it takes you a while to find that out. People who cut their own path oftentimes end up being more successful than folk who, follow the trail. And I think that it takes folk a minute to self-love. When you love yourself, then you don't care what other people think, and, people will learn to understand who you are just by being around you long enough. But I think that we contribute to our own compromise in ways that really undermine our self-love. We're so busy trying to get somebody else to love us that we do things that don't agree, with our being, our essence. We will live in a compromised space. We will work in a compromised space, which is the example that you just gave. Just to, I'll tell a story, and then I don't know where you want to take this. I had a colleague at East LA College. From the day I was hired, she did not want me there. And I was there for 18 years, from 2000 to 2018, until I retired and went over to the Dymally Institute at Dominguez Hills. And my whole motivation was, she ended up retiring the year before I retired. I said, I can retire now because my determination was, I'll walk out the door after you do. You're not going to make me quit. She used to give me fucked up class schedules and shit. Just do shit to just.
Yeah.
But it prepared me for some of the stuff I'm dealing with out there. And Dominguez, when I tried to bring Black radical thought out there, they went off when we brought Angela Davis out there. They went off, okay? And the same with Cornell. I said, how can you be a university and not hear all points of view? And so, this workshop is an evolution. White folk don't have the monopoly on knowledge. And Marcus Garvey said that, just as they think they can teach us, we can teach them. That's what this experience is about.
Interesting. So, Terry Boysaw is asking, with the widespread seemingly acceptance of diversity and hard to get in places just a minute ago, what is your feeling about this influx of seemingly acceptance and inclusion? Sustainable, real pacification?
Okay, well, first of all, we have to stop using diversity and inclusion as synonymous to anti-racism. Okay. The whole diversity and inclusion movement started out as us and then evolved to women. Now it's evolving, the sexuality movement.
Yes.
And so when you say diversity, you're talking about gender diversity. And when you're talking about inclusion, you are talking about a sexual diversity. Okay, you ain't talking about racial diversity anymore. And so we play ourselves on that. Now, what is the difference between diversity and inclusion and anti-racism? Diversity and inclusion was to try to get more people in the room, a more diverse spectrum of people in the room. Even when we got in the room, they talked about us. You know, when we went to college, they'd be like, "Oh, you must be an affirmative action admit."
Yes.
Yeah. When we became professors, "Oh, you must be an affirmative action."
Yes.
You know, all the time questioning our knowledge. You know, until we show them that we know something that they don't know. You know, oh, you must that must have been an affirmative action loan. The bank must have been away on that day when you have what they have. You know, and so the anti-racism movement focuses on how you feel about the people in the room. Because most of the time we were in the room, they didn't want us in the room, and they just accepted it. Well, you know, we're going through this affirmative action thing. We gotta tolerate women now. You know, just as bad as they was talking about affirmative action, they was talking about Me Too.
That's right.
Know, because the Me Too movement, you know, basically fueled the cancel culture. And in instances, the situations were true, but in a lot of situations, those situations were false. And so anytime you are trying to exclude someone, you know, you have to examine that too.
All right. Let me ask you this question. Okay. So do we care if white people listen? So we have the For White People Only conference. We have Tim Wise and Professor Eddie coming, and it's all good. For Dr. Sabad, I'll get my knowledge. Do we really care if white people are listening? What is the end goal?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is what we need. The position that our community needs to take is that racism is not a black person's problem. It's a white problem. It's their problem with us and anybody else who other than other white people.
That's right.
Drive that conversation. And we don't need to allow them to buy out of the discourse. You got what do we say in the streets? You got a problem with me? Tell me to my face. Tell me why you got a problem with me. Is there any way we can resolve this? You know, this has been going on for 400 years. Is there an end point to this? You know, we need to have a conversation. By the way, you know, I saw Janet Colloway came up with a comment. She has this series, this Sanctuary of Hope. She has this series called the Black Narrative Series.
Yes.
That's going to be 4 weeks long that she's asked me to moderate for the last couple of years, and Dymally Institute is partnering with them this year. We need to stop these one and dones. That's another problem in our Black community. These conversations tend to be feel-good sessions, and then once we kind of you know, get whatever we got off our chest, then we go about our way and the status quo remains. One of the things that we're doing at Dominguez Hills is we are going to start a racial reconciliation forum where we can have constant conversations about various aspects of race and racism, because it has to be a continuing conversation. It can't just be a one and done. So look out for Sanctuary Hope's Black Narrative Series. Look out for Dymally Institute's anti-racism workshops. There are other universities and community organizations that are now beginning to focus on the race discourse in a way I believe that we can learn from and advance from, and not just feel good sessions. Yeah, the time for the one and dones are over. We need to engage everybody around the table. They don't need to just be venting sessions between blacks and blacks or blacks and Latinos while white people sit around the table talking about, we hear you, we listening. No, tell us if you're hearing us and listening, tell us what you heard and tell us how you feel. Okay. That's how we need to engage that.
I'd like for you to add coffee conversations with Greg J to that list, because that's what we want to do. Keep informing the people, keep bringing people like yourself to come and share, and, let's exercise our brains and our hearts. And,
Right.
it's the long run is really what this is all about from a
Well,
global
what we
perspective.
said last year is, yeah, Black Lives Matters, but thinking lives matter too.
That's right.
We got to think about how we engage ourselves and what the follow-up is and what the end game should be. Not just get out there and make a bunch of noise.
All right, y'all. So for white people only is tomorrow. And what time is that there, Dr. Samad?
It starts at 11:30. It's from 11:30 to 2:30.
All right. We put the link in the chat there so you can register. And y'all keep it going. Tim Wise and what's his name? Eddie Glaude? How do you say
Glaude. Yeah,
Eddie Glaude.
Eddie Glaude. Yeah, Tim Wise comes up at noon. Eddie Glaude comes up at 1:15.
And if you guys have not heard Tim Wise, we're about to roll this video. He's about 9 minutes long. I was going to just edit it down and do a little soundbite, but I want you to hear this guy because you'll be like me, like, dang, and he's a very powerful speaker, powerful mind, and you know how we do it. Dr. Samad, thank you so much, my brother.
You're welcome. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
I am an anti-racist.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. All right, y'all. We're going to leave you now, but always like we say, hey, love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.
Because if you know the history of the whole concept of whiteness, if you know the history of the whole concept of the white race, where it came from and for what reason, you know that it was a trick, and it's worked brilliantly. See, prior to the mid to late 1600s in the colonies of what would become the United States, there was no such thing as the white race. Those of us of European descent did not refer to ourselves by that term really ever before then. In fact, in the old countries of Europe, we had spent most of our time killing each other. We didn't love each other. We weren't one big happy family. The side of my family that comes from Scotland, hell, they didn't even worry about fighting people outside of Scotland. Highlanders and lowlanders just fought the hell out of each other. So there was no white race, but in the colonies of what would become the United States, what did we see in the 1660s, 1670s? We began to see that Africans of indentured servant status, many of them not enslaved yet, they were not necessarily permanently enslaved. Some were, others were indentured like many poor Europeans for periods of 7 to 11 years. They could work off their indenture and then they would be free labor technically. Realized, as did the white indentured servants, the Europeans who hadn't even been called white yet, that they had a lot of things in common, like the fact that they were all getting their clock cleaned by the elite. And so they would get together more than our history books taught us, to foment rebellion against the elite, to try to get a better deal for themselves on the basis of economic necessity and economic justice. And what did the elite do? When you see that you're outnumbered by black and white folks who are penniless, landless, peasants, you have to do one of two things. You either have to kill them all, but you can't do that because who's going to work? Rich folks weren't going to. They had to get poor people to work. The whole point was to be a person of leisure back in those days. That was the goal, was not to work. So you couldn't kill them all. You didn't want to kill them all. You had to do the work yourself. You had to build your own levee, build your own house. No. Pick your own tobacco, harvest your own cotton. No, we're not going to do any of that. So you can't kill them, but you can co-opt them. And so the elite in Virginia, for example, in the colony, begins to give certain carrots to people of European descent, saying things like, we're going to let you own a little land, not much, but just a little. And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. Now you're free labor. And by the way, once you're free labor, you get 50 acres of land just because you're free labor, see? So we're going to cut you in on this deal. We're going to let you enter into contracts. We're going to let you testify in court. And here's the best of all. We're going to put you on the slave patrol to keep those people in line, right? The idea was you're still going to get your clock clean. We still don't like you. We still aren't going to really empower you or change your economic subordination, but we're going to make you honorary members of this team, and you're going to help us keep those other people down. And so they got a little taste of power, and it did effectively divide and conquer those coalitions. Those rebellions began to stop almost instantly Fast forward to the Civil War era. You have rich white folks in the South, where I come from, standing up and openly admitting that the reason they're prepared to secede from the Union, and the only reason they ever articulated publicly, ever, was to maintain and extend slavery and white supremacy not only where it already existed, but into the newly acquired, that is to say, stolen territories from Mexico to the west. That was what they said. Now we lie about it. We say it wasn't about slavery, that it was about states' rights. Yes, the right of the states to keep and maintain slaves, exactly. But back then they had no shame, so they didn't try and cover it up. They openly said it, but once again, the rich didn't want to go do the work. Are you kidding? No. They're going to get poor people to go fight for them. And the poor folks didn't even own slaves. Now think, how do you get poor people who don't even own the shirt on their back, let alone slaves, to go fight to keep your slaves for you? You've got to convince them that their skin is more important than their economic interest. Because think about it, if I am a farmer who has to charge you $1 a day or $2 a week to work on your farm and harvest that tobacco or pick that cotton, but you can get a black person to do it for free because you own them, who's going to get the job? Not me. In other words, slavery actually undermined the wages and the wage base, the economic floor of the typical white working class or low-income person. But they were told, if these people are freed, they're going to take your job. No, fool, they got your job. That's the point. And so at some level, again, working class white people being harmed by white privilege, relatively being advantaged, right? Being given a leg up, being given a membership to the club, but in absolute terms being kept economically subordinated by the very thing that gave them a sense of superiority. How's that for irony? Then in the present era, this hasn't stopped. This is not ancient history. Now we have people running around insisting that we should close the border with Mexico because if we don't, the wages of working class people will continue to fall. The implication being that the only reason workers are paid like crap in this country is because the border is open. But if you believe that, you would actually have to believe that if that border were closed, that all these owners of capital and industry would just say, oh, well, you figured us out. Here, it's a raise. Do we really believe that the only thing keeping bosses from paying people more is the presence of low-wage, medium, semi-skilled labor from south of this artificial border? Is that really what we believe? We know that if that border is closed, it isn't going to be closed to capital. It isn't going to be closed to goods. If you have a border that can be crossed by capital looking for the highest return on investment or goods looking for the highest price, but labor is chained to its country of origin, how is that going to work to the benefit of working people? By definition, it doesn't. By definition, it immiserates the working class. Divide and conquer. But the best example of all, perhaps, in the contemporary era, in the greater New Orleans area after Katrina. Here you have two communities that were the most hard hit. The lower Ninth Ward, mostly black community, 94% African American, about 40% official poverty rate, heavy working class community. And right across the canal, St. Bernard Parish, Chalmette, 95% white, also working class, high levels of poverty, economically very similar. And at the end of the day, in those first few days of September 2005, more similar than they probably would have realized. Because when those levees broke, they all got their stuff jacked. They all got their stuff destroyed. But if you had asked white folks in Chalmette, and I've done it, who was the cause of the problems in the greater New Orleans area prior to that flooding, they would have pointed across that canal at those black folks, wouldn't have called them black folks, and would have said, there, that's the problem. 70% of the white folks in St. Bernard Parish voted for David Duke, white supremacist, neo-Nazi, former head of the largest Ku Klux Klan group in the United States when he ran for governor in 1991. 7 out of 10 gladly voted for him because he was blaming black folks for all of their problems, and they bought it. What's the irony? The irony is that while they were blaming black people for their problems, while they were blaming black people for the conditions of the greater New Orleans area in which they lived, nobody was paying attention, least of all they, to the fact that these white elite politicians, either in Baton Rouge or in Washington, whose job it was to secure those levees, to make sure that levee funds were spent in the proper way and that they were spent at all, those mostly white and mostly elite politicians did nothing. At the end of the day, it wasn't just the black folks in the lower Ninth Ward they didn't care about. They really couldn't have given a rat's ass about those poor and working class white folks either. And yet, when the people of Chalmette, people of St. Bernard Parish got back into session, first time they had a city council meeting, parish council meeting after the flooding, The lights aren't even on yet. The water isn't even hooked up. And the first order of business was to pass an ordinance saying that you couldn't rent property in St. Bernard Parish to anyone who wasn't a blood relative. Now, I'll leave it to your imagination as to why you'd want to pass a law. That law had never existed before. But now that it's been emptied out and you don't know who might come back, that's a damn good way to keep black people out, isn't it? Because if you're 95% white to begin with, if you pass an ordinance that says that, that's a great, you can't say no blacks need apply. You can't say no blacks allowed, but that was an ingenious way to get around the law. Now, they got caught. There was a lawsuit threatening, they got rid of the ordinance. But my point in bringing it up is to say, once again, divide and conquer is working. These white folks in Chalmette need to march across that canal and join hands with the black folks who've been sitting there more than willing to work with them for an awful long time, and march on Baton Rouge and march on D.C. and march on the Corps of Engineers and recognize their commonality of interest. But the whiteness and the lure of whiteness has tricked these have nothing in their bank account white people into believing that they got more in common with the rich white folks on St. Charles Avenue that didn't lose anything in that flooding than they have in common with the black working class folks who live about 500 yards away.
Make it a peaceful day.
All right, my brother. Thank you for the opportunity. I always look forward to
Yes, sir.
posting out. Posting out. Getting the comment posted up.
Yes,
All right,
sir. All right. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.